This is it. No turning back.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and welcome to part 5 of the Twilight Zone exploration. So looking at all 156 episodes of the original series in batches of 6, and this is part 5. So we're getting towards the end of the first season now, which is kind of interesting. But there's loads of good stuff here. So this, out of these 6, I've actually put a little asterisk on 5 of them as some of my favourites. So that's pretty good. So there's only one that's slightly weaker, I think, because it's an idea that's kind of been played around with before on the Twilight Zone. So wasn't as effective. But they're quite different, these episodes, and it's going in places it hasn't been before. And I think there's a sense of these episodes kind of feel longer than 25 minutes. They feel quite epic, and it's kind of interesting. You kind of get lost in them a little bit, which I think is awesome. So I'm starting with an episode called People Are Alike All Over. Okay, this is how the episode People Are Alike All Over begins. So this is the opening narration. You're looking at a species of flimsy little two-legged animal with extremely small heads whose name is man. Warren Mackison, aged 35. Samuel A. Conrad, aged 31. They're taking a highway into space. Man unshackling himself and sending his tiny groping fingers up into the unknown. Their destination is Mars, and in just a moment we'll land there with them. So People Are Alike All Over is from a short story by Paul Fairman. So again, it's written by Rod Serling, but it's based on a short story by Paul Fairman, and it's a really interesting story with these 2 astronauts that are going to Mars, and one of them, played by the awesome Roddy McDowall. So Roddy McDowall's in this one, which makes you want to watch it anyway. But he's really nervous, and he's very afraid of the unknown and the idea of he's got no idea what the Martians are going to be like, if there is life on Mars, what they're going to be like, and he's panicking about it. And the other guy keeps telling him, people are alike all over. Don't worry. There's good people everywhere, sort of thing. People are alike all over. He keeps saying that phrase. Or people are alike. And there's phrases like it. And that's kind of this theme through the episode. And what happens is they get to Mars and they meet these Martians eventually. There's a little bit of stuff on the ship where Roddy McDowall's character is really frightened to open the door. And eventually they get out and they meet the Martians. And the way that the Martians are characterized, it seems kind of creepy. And you can see that it's not, there's going to be some kind of awful twist at the end, which there is. And it's a gradual thing. It's really nice the way it sort of unfolds gradually, and you can't tell exactly where it's going to go. And it's got a really chilling ending. And I don't think it's that predictable. And it plays with the people who are like all over phrase that you see. It's a really good episode. So yeah, nice to see Roddy McDowall in it. And also, it's just a great episode. So that was that one. The second one in this batch is Execution. Okay, so Execution starts with this opening narration. Commonplace, if somewhat grim, unsocial event known as a necktie party, the guest of dishonour, a cowboy named Joe Caswell. Just a moment away from a rope, a short dance several feet off the ground, and then the dark eternity of all evil men. Mr. Joe Caswell, who, when the good Lord passed out a conscience, a heart, a feeling for fellow men, must have been out for a beer and missed out. Mr. Joe Caswell in the last quiet moment of a violent life. So Execution is another one that's been written by Rod Serling, based on another unpublished story by George Clayton Johnson. So this isn't one he's taken from a magazine or something. This is one that wasn't published. And George Clayton Johnson has appeared a few times already. And he definitely is quite a big feature of the Twilight Zone. And this is a really interesting episode where a killer from 1880, a murderer from 1880, is being hanged. And as he's being hanged, as the noose kills him, or at least just before, it's kind of about to kill him. He is rocketed to the future, and basically this scientist wakes him up and tells him that he's the first successful attempt at time travel, and he's been pulled into the future. He's been pulled into the 20th century by this scientist. But this scientist has done it completely randomly and doesn't realise that he's transported a killer into the future. and it plays out really well. It's as I was saying at the beginning, it's one of those episodes that just seems longer than it is. It's got a really cool story, and it just sort of rattles along really well, and it's got lots of elements to it, and it's really, really good. The central performance by Albert Salmi is really good. He's completely disorientated, freaked out, alienated. He doesn't know what to do, but he reverts to his violent nature pretty quickly. There's a brilliant scene in a diner that's really cool. And there's a really good sequence in a phone box, because he's from 1880, so this is all really unfamiliar, and it just frightens him. And he has like all the noise in the 20th century and all that kind of stuff. And it's done really well. So, yeah, it's kind of unpredictable. You don't know where it's going to go. It's a really creative episode. And, yeah, definitely one of the best, I think. And one I'd forgotten about as well. So that was pretty cool seeing that this time. So Execution, originally written by George Clayton Johnson, but scripted by Rod Serling. Okay, the third one is a beautiful story and very different tone to most Twilight Zone episodes. It's called The Big Tall Wish. And the really lovely story, The Big Tall Wish, starts with this opening narration. In this corner of the universe, a prize fighter named Bowley Jackson, 183 pounds and an hour and a half from a comeback at St. Nick's Arena. Mr. Bowley Jackson, who by the standards of his profession is an ageing over-the-hill relic of what was, and who now sees a reflection of a man who has left too many pieces of his youth in too many stadiums for too many years, before too many screaming people. Mr. Bowley Jackson, who might do well to look for some gentle magic in the hard surface glass that stares back at him. So this story is about a boxer and his son really wants him to win, and there's a lovely relationship at the center of this between him and his son. There's the boxer's wife is an important character in it as well, but really it's about this relationship between the boxer and his son. And all three of these characters I've just mentioned are black, which is kind of interesting because it was pretty rare in those days to have that kind of positive portrayal of a black family at the center of a story. So I think that's pretty good. And apparently Rod Serling did that deliberately, felt really strongly about that. So, you know, I think that's pretty cool. So, yeah, the boxer, it's like a classic story of a boxer who is being offered the chance to make money by losing, but he wants to win. He wants to have a lot of pride in what he does, and his son really wants him to win, and he's got this sort of big, tall wish, is the phrase, that his dad will win this boxing match. And it plays out really beautifully, and I won't tell you how it ends, but I will say that after the climax of the story happens, there's a really lovely epilogue between the son and the boxer. That's really nice dialogue, just really well written. And because of the nature of it, because it's quite sentimental and it's got this sort of really strong heart to it, it's not a surprise that it's written by Rod Serling. A lot of the episodes that are like that are written by him. So, yeah, really, really strong episode, but very different to what you normally get in the Twilight Zone. Okay, so now we are on the first ever episode I've ever seen. So I saw this when I was a young teenager, and it blew my mind, and it was the first one I'd seen, and I was hooked straight away. I thought, what is this thing? And it was when they were showing the Twilight Zone late night, every night, on Channel 4, I think it was. And I was about 14 or something, 13 or 14. And I saw this episode, and that was it. I'd watch it every night. And I was absolutely smitten, fell in love with it straight away. And obviously, as you can probably tell from these videos, I've always been in love with it. But this episode was the first one I saw, so it really does have a very strong place in my heart. And it's called A Nice Place to Visit. And A Nice Place to Visit begins with this opening narration. Portrait of a man at work, the only work he's ever done, the only work he knows. His name is Henry Francis Valentine, but he calls himself Rocky because that's the way his life has been. Rocky and perilous and uphill at a dead run all the way. He's tired now, tired of running or wanting, of waiting for the breaks that come to others but never to him, never to Rocky Valentine, a scared, angry little man. He thinks it's all over now, but he's wrong. For Rocky Valentine, it's just the beginning. A Nice Place to Visit. And it's written by Charles Beaumont. Another good episode by Charles Beaumont. And it's very typically Twilight Zone, where it plays with death, plays with expectations of the afterlife. It has a really nasty character at the center of it. It's another two-person play, essentially. And the two characters are bouncing off each other for the whole thing. There are other characters in it, but really it is these central performances, which are brilliant. And basically you've got this lowlife who is just this horrible, arrogant criminal who dies early on in the episode, and he is kind of revived, if you like, and meets this guy in white, and he starts getting all these things offered to him: women, drink, the chance to gamble, and he's playing like this, and he's very happy, and he's enjoying himself, and he's having the whale of a time, and it all goes wrong. I won't tell you why in case you get a chance to watch it, but it's just an awesome ending. Very Twilight Zone, classic stuff. And yeah, Nice Place to Visit was the first episode I ever saw. So yeah, it really does have an extremely important place in my heart because of that. And yeah, it's just a really cool ending as well. It's just a really classic kind of twist, if you like. So yeah, that was that one. And then the next one in this schedule that appeared on the Twilight Zone is a really, really strong, beautifully written episode called Nightmare as a Child. Okay, Nightmare as a Child starts with this opening narration. Month of November, hot chocolate and a small cameo of a child's face, imperfect only in its solemnity. And these are the improbable ingredients to a human emotion. An emotion, say, like fear. But in a moment, this woman, Helen Foley, will realise fear. She will understand what are the properties of terror. A little girl will lead her by the hand and walk her into a nightmare. So again, like I've said with a couple of these episodes, this is quite different from for the Twilight Zone. It's in a way you could link it to the Big Tall Wish, as in it's grounded in reality. There is a sort of fantastical, mystical element to it, but 90% of the episode is very real, and ultimately it's about an adult woman who has still not really dealt with the trauma of her mother dying, and the Twilight Zone allows her to deal with it and actually kind of get some kind of justice for this horrific incident that happened to her when she was a kid. So she's having these memories come back to her through the episode, through the actions and dialogue of this little girl that she sees. And this little girl is brilliantly played by this actress I didn't know before. Really interesting acting from this little girl. But the main character's done really well as well. It's a really sensitive and powerful episode, I think. It's very gripping. And basically, after this established that she has this dialogue with this little girl, the little girl runs off frightened because she hears that someone's coming into the building, and it's a man who is from this woman's past, a really important man from her past, and he's just really creepy all the way through it. It's that sort of like really subtle stuff where he's like standing too close to her. He's going on about how he had a crush on her when she was a little girl, which is really makes you think, oh, that's a bit dodgy. Yeah, just the whole, every bit of his dialogue, every bit of him in the episode is really creepy. So it ends really well and all makes sense. And yeah, it's quite unique, I think, in the Twilight Zone stories. So that's Nightmare as a Child. And then the last one is the weakest of the six. It was still a great episode. And if you hadn't seen the Twilight Zone before, it's a good representation of what you'd find in the Twilight Zone. But I think it's similar to a couple of other episodes that have already happened on the show. And it sort of plays out in a predictable way, if you like. So that's called A Stop at Willoughby. And A Stop at Willoughby begins with this opening narration. This is Gart Williams, age 38, a man protected by a suit of armour all held together by one bolt. Just a moment ago, someone removed the bolt, and Mr. Williams' protection fell away from him and left him a naked target. He's been cannonaded this afternoon by all the enemies of his life. His insecurity has shelled him. His sensitivity has straddled him with humiliation. His deep-rooted disquiet about his own worth has zeroed in on him, landed on target, and blown him apart. Mr. Gart Williams, an ad agency exec, who in just a moment will move into the Twilight Zone in a desperate search for survival. It's written by Rod Serling. Again, a lot of the episodes have got that sort of sentimental nature, are written by him. And it's basically this man that's very unhappy, extremely unhappy in his life. He's frequently humiliated by this really demanding boss at work. He's got a horrible wife, and he's just really unhappy. And he basically escapes into this place called Willoughby sometimes. And through the episode, he escapes more and more, and then eventually escapes permanently. And yeah, it's played out well. It's written well. It's just not quite as unpredictable and compelling as some of the others. But it's still a good episode. And yeah, a nice place to finish this batch of 6. So yeah, a really nice selection of episodes there. And the next video, I think, is where we end season 1. So season 1 is such a strong season. And as I said, I've been asterixing on my notes. I've been asterixing some of my favourites, so I can go back to them and pick out which ones were my favourites when I've done all this and look back on the series as a whole. And I've asterisked 5 of these 6, which is pretty cool. So yeah, clearly very strong episodes. So yeah, thanks for watching, and keep curious. See you soon. Bye.
Picture of what it's like to be you.